level, they said, we're going to get more density into areas. And the philosophy they tried to adopt was the areas they tried to adopt were areas that had good transport, good shops, good medical, good hospitals. So it wasn't just everywhere that got the density. They hand selected town centres. 170 of the town centres were selected in New South Wales. Then they went a further step and they said, what we're going to do is we're going to switch off controls. So controls that have been inhibiting development in areas, we're going to switch some of those, not all, but some of those controls off. Some height controls have been switched off. Some FSR, floor space ratio controls have been turned off where it, where it actually gets bigger. Even this, what we've got on the bottom of the screen is pretty cool there because you can see a lot of people are just dealing with what's at the bottom, just a little house. And some of the density that's been approved within 400 metres of town centres is 6 stories. It's not open slather, but we'll get to that in a second. So biggest myth that we've been asked, because this was launched, it was talked about 6 to 9 months ago. It was coming. And then literally out of nowhere, it was launched. A week later, it was gazetted. So that means you can actually put a development application against it for review. And that was from the 28th of February. So people now who wish to get higher density can make an application from the 28th of February. I'm a bit nervous because Ellie, our town planner, our urban planner expert here, is going to be picking apart everything I'm going to say, but he can correct me later. So not even the agents have got our heads around it. And I think even the planners are starting to get their heads around it really well. But, even people in the community, they're asking. So while we're here, it's a rising demand for affordability, the state government's urgent push for higher density, and the Northern Beaches has been identified for strategic development. Now, we've got probably about 8 town centres that have been designated out of the 170. The logic behind the town centres is the infrastructure, transport, shopping, healthcare, and it's designed to minimise pressure because there's, transport. So it sort of helps. As much as people may argue that, there's already enough traffic and already enough transport, we get that, but they've just insisted that it's got to go in. And I think the driver is also affordability. There's a really, really big gap in our area, between 1.2 to 2 million, where you get a young couple buying a 2-bedroom unit and they actually cannot make that jump to the house. It's just too big a jump with your mortgage and with costs. So they've tried to fill in that gap in our area, that 1.2 to 2 million. So if you're developing stock that's much higher in value, that's not the aim, but it will happen. Council's delay has led to this intervention. So you've pretty much got your homes, which in the area have been identified, low rise, and this is where it starts. People start to struggle to get their head around it. Dual occupancy too, they can be attached. Terraces, much like a townhouse as we know it. Manor housing, where you've got apartments, more than 3 apartments in a building, 3-storey unit blocks and 4 to 6-storey unit blocks. You may gasp at the 4 to 6 unit blocks and think that'll never happen. Within 400 metres of a lot of these town centres, if you're in R3 zoning, that's what they're allowing, providing, you just meet all the controls. And we'll go through that briefly. Dual occupancies back. Our community probably remembers the dual occupancies that were out there. Dual occupancies were out in the 80s. People did extraordinarily well. It filled a beautiful part of the market. It came in the way of battle axe blocks a lot of the way, where you put a driveway down the side of the house and you built at the back. And then the dual locks are back now, not in that same fashion, but we'll cover that as well. Most Torrens style properties are qualifying. So the biggest myth that I've got to answer tonight is dual occupancy is not within town centres only, it's everywhere. So there's 110,000 properties on the Northern Beaches. On Torrens title, of which there's probably about 60,000. They're all going to be eligible, providing they meet the size requirements and a few other things. But dual occupancy is back. And it even came out before this policy came out, but it's been a slow uptake. We've got a heat map. So in the documentation that you've got there, there's a heat map, the red zones and the orange zones. And the reason we've zoned it like that is they're 400 metre parameters from a town centre and they're 800 metre parameters from the town centre. And that's the heat map where the concentration of higher density is allowed. So it's a really nice conversation to have to someone when they tell you they're an R2 or R3 within that zone. They feel good, but then they don't know what to feel after that. They're like, okay, where do we go from here? So hopefully we're going to fill those gaps in. Shop top housing, terraces, townhouses. Believe it or not, commercial is not included in this, which is weird because they've taken from the town centre outwards. So they've left what's happening in the town centre out of a lot of this policy. So we've got areas like these guys here, these guys here, or the service station, they don't benefit from what we're talking about tonight. So it leaves out commercial. Areas, here it is, Manly, Manly Vale, DY, Frenchs Forest, Forestville, and Mona Vale. Commercial realities and challenges. It's interesting because people think it's just a no-brainer. We're done. We've made money. Let's go to the bank and spend it. It's not really the case. There's other factors which commercially now are coming into play, which we're now starting to commercially play out. We're sitting down with landlords. We're sitting down with owners. We're sitting down with developers, sometimes in one meeting. And then when we're talking with these guys, this is what comes up. So it's like tick, 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 tick. You're in that zone. And then it goes, but let's work out what the end stock's worth. So it's got a gross revenue. What's the actual stock worth? So if I'm going to build a dual occupancy here, is it worth 2 million plus 2 million, 4 million? Yes, that's what it's going to be worth. Then you work it back. So then they go, okay, well, what's it going to cost to build this now? And there is going to be a pressure, which we've seen already with construction costs. So I think you'll find with more stock being delivered into the market, you're not going to be selling your property for as much as you think because there's more stock coming into the market. And you're going to be spending probably a bit more than you think when it comes down to the actual reality of it's even hard to get a builder to build something now. If more stock's coming on and we're building more, it's going to be even harder. So that may lead to, supply chain pressures, cost of materials, builders and things like that. So the impact on the end product values and balancing affordability. So then you've got to say, okay, where it sits. Everyone hates when when a real estate agent says this, but we've been rattling it on for 30 years. Sometimes it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So it's 1/3 your build, 1/3 your land, and 1/3 your profit, on a raw site. So if it's baby maths, have a go at that sort of number, and then you start to get it around in your head and you can hone down in. The affordability gap. So that's what I was referring to. Your unit values in DY as an example of an everyday suburb on the Northern Beaches, a brand new unit at 1213. I wanted to talk about brand new because you're developing a brand new stock in the end. So that's what you're competing up against. Entry-level house prices, second-hand homes, $2 million, and then the critical need for stock in between. The road ahead, more stock, greater affordability. That is the aim, more affordability for our kids. So today, another conversation with a client. Our poor kids. If there's any Italians in the room, all their 18-year-old kids bought a house 20 years ago, 30 years ago, when they were 18. And that doesn't happen anymore. So there's this pressure on affordability now. Lending money is harder for these kids. Land tax issues and stuff like that. So generally, they're getting into a 1 or 2 bedroom unit and stepping up through the price ranges as they get more sort of mature financially. Community impact on improved housing options and exciting opportunities for local developers and investors. So again, there's that rezone SMS. Have a little, hopefully that's all come through to you straight away, but that's the slide that I've done today. Ellie's slides are going to be there as well. And then I just wanted to get a feel of maybe 1 or 2 questions to see what direction you will want us to go with Ellie as well. Get that microphone out there. Yeah, look at that, like a magician. Wow, how'd you do that, Bidan? Yes.
Just let's say on a dwelling, secondary dwelling.
Yep.
Are you able, if it gets passed or whatever else, are you allowed to sell them separately, or do they still get sold as one?
Separated titles.
Separated titles.
Yeah, good question. Yeah, so it's all pretty much everything going through separated titles. Yep. Yeah, the 170 town centres that they've nominated in those areas, 800 metres. Or dual occupancy, don't forget, anywhere in New South Wales is, yes. So dual occupancy, yes. Subdivision, anywhere in New South Wales. Ellie's going to pull me up on this. I've got a feeling. And then also the 800 metres, when you're going through those other ranks, those other densities that we spoke about, they're all be able to sold separately. It's a really good question. Any other questions before I hand over to Ellie? The 800 metres? Yep.
I live on.
Yes.
How does that affect the houses that are in the zone who are out?
Yeah, that's I guess a lot of people are worried about if you're the blue example, what about if I'm next door? They're worried about that. So there is obviously that pressure. And also the 800 metres there's a heat map on that SMS that I've sent you. You can type your address in and it actually will show you exactly whether you are in or out. That map is only indicative. You can still be within 5 houses and not be on that heat map. So they couldn't quite apply the perfect graph for the whole country, so for the whole state, but they've given a guide. And then if you meet those principles of the 800 metres, you may actually measure the 800 metres physically and you're in, and that may qualify. Do you know what I mean? But Ellie will speak a little bit about that because it's not as the crow flies 800 metres. It's got to be, I believe, walkable and comfortable access to that town centre. Another question? Have I answered? Give me another go.
So it's a dividing line. It could be halfway through a house.
No. Yeah, I think there's. Yeah, so if it's halfway through a house, like it's chopped your house in half, the council's Ellie's probably better qualified to answer this one, to be honest, but I'll have a go. It's council's just tried to give a guide with that heat map. It's not by any means a definitive 800 metres within a metre or two. They've just sort of say, guys, we reckon you qualify if you're in this area. So you probably put up, if you wanted, you probably put up a bit of a fight and say, look, we've actually technically measured it and technically it is. And they'll say, well, technically you're right, you can do it.
So it could be very...
Sorry, was that? Could be very... Yeah, it's going to be really interesting. And I think particularly everyone's... it's a bit like COVID when you're saying we're all in it together. I think everyone's going through those same sort of pain points, thinking, how does who do I call? Who do I talk to? So tonight we sold out in an hour tonight with everyone that's here. We had to say no to a lot of people. It's a big thing. We'll probably put another one on next week or next 2 weeks. It's huge. But to get your hands on, I think the goal is not to get your hands on a real estate agent. Our value is not as high as Ellie, a town planner. Everyone's trying to get their hands on a town planner to actually further their inquiries for good or bad. It's not always like, hey, we're in the lottery. It's like, I don't want it. The town planners it's very kind that Ellie's donated his time tonight. I think it's going to be interesting for town planners. These guys, Ellie's even designed a ChatGPT bot within ChatGPT to answer your questions. He's getting so inundated. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So duplexes can be done in the whole of the old Warringah Council. Will it be under state legislation or code, or will it be council, like the parameters, will it fit under like a CDC?
Yep.
Or will it be DA?
It's going to be, if it's a complying development, so it's all with everything within the code, I believe you can go through council for it. But then if it's outside of that, I believe, private certify, or maybe the other way around. Ellie will answer that question for you. Remind me. Anything else? We'll circle back around for Q&A at the end. I'll pass you over to Ellie. I appreciate everyone's time is valuable, so I want to move. Ellie, welcome. Thank you. The crowd clapped in. Is that someone's phone?
Hello. There we go. Someone was mucking me around. I'll just go to my slides. Here we go. Well, first of all, another round of applause for the Novak team for putting this on. I was privy to all the WhatsApp messages. Let's do this. Let's do that. So it was an amazing achievement. I think we were able to do this within a week. About a week ago, Mark said, "Ellie, let's do this." I said, "Yep, no problem." So I was able to whip up this presentation for you guys tonight. So as Mark kind of alluded to, all of this is quite new. I don't know all the answers. I don't think you'll find another town planner, another council officer, or another real estate agent that will have all the answers. But nevertheless, it's certainly exciting times for everybody. And I think this is a great night and a great forum to spread the word. Tonight we'll be covering quite a bit more detail than Mark's presentation. I'm not going to bore you with all the slides and everything written on them, but nevertheless, I hope you guys are able to take something in from this presentation. So tonight we're going to cover quite a few topics. What is it? What are we actually talking about tonight? The low-rise code. Why do we actually need it? Mark alluded to a few things around that. The map, the indicative map, there's already been some questions around, is the map accurate or not? There are some areas that are excluded from this policy, and we'll talk about what those areas are and what actually does low-rise and medium-rise density actually, what does it actually look like? What do these buildings look like? There are probably, you walk around Northern Beaches, you'll probably see some of them, but you don't actually know what they're called in the town planning world. I'll share with you some of the key planning controls in your pamphlets that the Novaks have prepared for you tonight. They've got a really good summary. I'm not going to go through all of those tonight, but I will also share with you some case studies on 2 properties in the local area. And last but not least, I'll be around for questions and answers. This is just a plug for NAVON Planning, for the company that I run. So I've been doing this for almost 20 years as a town planner. We get involved with complying developments, DAs, land environment court work, as well as planning advice, whether you're looking to buy a property or you own a property, what exactly can you do with it? So what is this policy that we're all talking about? So it comes under the housing SEP. The housing SEP, some of you might be familiar with seniors living, SEP 55, those types of things that sometimes real estate agents promote on their ads for developments. So the housing SEP is a very broad policy. It's a state planning policy. Someone asked a question before, is it state, is it council? This policy we're talking about is state, but there are council controls that are certainly switched on in certain cases. There are distances, 400 metres, 800 metre radius. There's also specific controls like floor space, lot size and height controls. And something that some people are not so sure about is this a DA with council or is it a CDC with a certifier? This particular policy is all DAs. So unfortunately, it's not a CDC stream, which is a much quicker approval process. It's actually a DA that goes through council. So while certainly this is, I would say the government is really ambitious in what they're trying to achieve, it doesn't say anywhere that this is going to be a quick process, but it certainly unlocks your site for future development. So why do we need it? There's a lot of information on that slide up there. I didn't realize the screen would be so big, but this is really, really helpful. I guess probably looking at the last point in that slide, it really comes down to the missing middle. In other words, there's a lot of houses and things like that around, the granny flats, and then you go up to the top, which are like blocks of apartments, which are 6 or more stories high. This captures everything in the middle. This is the map that Mark was talking about. I've kind of zoomed in as much as I could on the Northern Beaches council area. You'll see all those yellow areas are indicative areas where if you've got a property in those areas, then I would say probably 95% chance you're in this area. The blue areas are actually the town centres. So like where we're sitting now, this is a town centre in blue. I've zoomed in even further. I believe this is where we are in DY. So you can see the actual town centre is not coloured yellow. So the way the government measures these distances is from the actual boundaries. I think if you were to look a bit closer, there's like a bluish boundary. So everything else further is included, but the actual commercial buildings, like where we are now, those are excluded from this policy. So how do we measure the distance? This has come up tonight already. I've had quite a few conversations with people in the last week or two around how do you measure it? It's actually walking distance. So we all use Google Maps, I would presume, or Apple Maps. There's different settings. You can click drive. You're going to drive to this place. You're going to catch a public transport, or you're going to walk. So probably the most simplest method to do it is to use the Google Maps app and the walking mode, because that actually is how you define where this area, whether your property is in or out. And I've put on that last point there, the map can't be relied on. It's all up to you. So you've got to be the one that determines where, if your property is in or out. It's not really council. I've even seen a lot of planning solicitors have been sending out different updates and their interpretation of these new codes. And they've even said, even if you get a surveyor out to physically measure your property to where the edge of the town centre is, even if you have to go to that extent to prove that you're in the area, then that's what you have to do. So this is just a slide. Whoops, sorry. This slide is actually taken. I had an inquiry for a site in Edgecliff, or I think it was in Paddington, and you can see in the top right-hand corner of each image, that's Edgecliff Station, if you're familiar with that. So on the left map is that LMR map. The blue dot is where this guy's property is, and he told me that he's got developers that are looking at the property and want to purchase the property. But they told him you're not in the orange area, so we're not going to give you as much as we thought we would. So he asked me for some help. So it literally took about 10 minutes of my time. It was my first inquiry, like in this particular scenario, and I said, okay, let me work it out. I spent about 10 minutes doing a bit of research, and I used Google Maps on the right-hand side. So in the right-hand side, you can see where his property is, around where that red little dot is at the bottom of that aerial map. And then you follow it up. There's actually a pathway through that park. And he told me there's a pathway. So I thought, okay, I'll just punch it in. And you can see his property is certainly within 700 metres. And the requirement is if you're near a train station, I don't believe there are any train stations around here, but if you have a property outside, let's say Northern Beaches, you actually have to measure it from the entrance of the train station. So I know Edgecliff Station well, and if you look at that map, it's saying the entrance is somewhere on the right-hand side. The entrance is a lot closer than that. So in fact, this guy's property, I told him, is certainly within this zone, this LMR area. There are actually a lot of places that are excluded in this zone, in this LMR, low medium rise zone. Even though the map will tell you that your property might be in it, you might have a property, let's say in Paddington or somewhere else in the inner west, And particularly, let's say, give an example in the inner west, this clause here says your property is actually excluded because it's under the flight path. So you've got to be careful. Over here, I don't think there are any planes that flying past, but another issue is if it's a heritage listed item, you're out. But if your property is in a heritage conservation area, you're actually in. But obviously subject to council's controls and their rigorous assessment process. So bear in mind, there's a lot of properties that are not in this area. So what does low and mid-rise housing look like? Mark shared this screen with you before. There's dual occupancies, terraces, townhouses, manor houses. There's 3-story buildings and also 4 to 6-story buildings. So we're not talking about high-rise buildings like you see in Hong Kong or Dubai. We're not talking about that here. We're talking about very basic and simple buildings, which I believe are quite appropriate for Sydney. So this is what a dual occupancy looks like. You probably haven't seen one for a while in the Northern Beaches because they've been prohibited until now. But this is, so again, the text, if you want to read it, you can, but it gives you a bit of a summary of what a dual occupancy is. It can certainly be strata subdivided or possibly Torrens title. You also have townhouses. So this is a nice example in Port Macquarie. So townhouses are typically 3 or more dwellings on the one property. It could be 3 or even 10 properties. And naturally, in a townhouse, it's strata subdivided and not Torrens title. You're also able to do terraces. So this is an example in Ermington. So basically side by side, again, think about areas like Newtown or Paddington. Again, this is a type of housing which technically you're allowed now under this new planning policy. You can also do manor houses. I don't think the government has been trying to push manor houses for quite a while. I don't think it's a popular type of development, certainly not in Northern Beaches area, but it is basically a small block of apartments, usually 2 stories and with 3 units. You can also strata subdivide them. So the policy, well, I guess the big feature of the policy are apartments and shop-top housing. Apartments, I think we all know what they are. Shop-top housing, for people that don't know what they are, is essentially it's pretty much like where we are now. You've got commercial on the bottom and apartments on top. That's pretty much the definition of shop-top housing. These are some key stats. I didn't put them together, but a really great e-planning company called PropCode has actually put these statistics together, as well as this map. Basically, you'll see there, while the policy technically applies, but they worked it out. There's about 220,000 properties it applies to, but only around 39% of these properties could be redeveloped. They've done the number crunching. I'm not going to do it myself, so I'll trust them because they have all the data. But while it might sound very exciting, I think obviously projects have to stack up, and this is kind of the analysis that they did. They did say too in these stats, 18% will not redevelop due to things like being under the flight path, heritage, listed properties, etc., or flood affected properties. So this is just a bit of zooming in on the actual planning controls, similar to what you've got in your booklets, but I've just shared a few examples with you. So you have dual occupancies and semis. So it applies to all residential zones. The minimum lot size is 450 square meters. It doesn't apply if your property is 449 square meters, because after all, this is the legislation. So you'll have to make sure you measure your property correctly. The minimum lot size is 12 meters. FSR like what Mark said, floor space ratio, that pretty much tells you how much floor space you can build on your property. Maximum height 9.5 meters, which I believe is pretty reasonable. A lot of councils only allow 8.5 meters, so you can almost fit a third level or even an attic level in one of these buildings. Regarding townhouses on the right-hand side, applies to all residential zones. Again, there is a minimum lot size of 600 square meters. The FSO is 0.7 to 1, so you're allowed a little bit more floor space and etc. And you can strata subdivide a townhouse development. Question? Someone want to give them the mic? 1 second. I might be able to hear you, but maybe others won't.
Yeah, just wanted to see, so with the control of the points here, do those controls override the LEP? Or
Yes.
yes, it does. Okay,
Yep.
so if there's an 8.5 metre height limit in the LEP.
Correct. It's now 9.5. Correct. Good question.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. As well as the minimum lot size, etc. But the government spent a lot of time working with council, so these numbers you're seeing in front of you are not just random; they weren't plucked out of nowhere. So there was a lot of research in defining these controls in consultation with councils. So right now, if you're in an R1 or an R2 zone, within 800 meters of like where we're standing now, basically, you could technically build a block of apartments. There is a 0.8 to 1 FSR, okay, and maximum height of 9.5. So you won't have a 10-story building, but it'll probably be a 2-story building, I would say. Whilst these controls, we can talk about it for ages, but whilst these controls might sound nice, if you're developing a block of apartments, there's probably about 50 controls that you have to go through, including councils. Some councils' controls also will be picked up on, which I'll explain later. So it's not just, there are certainly, this is a state policy, but also councils' controls will be switched on in certain cases. Again, between the left and the right, it really depends on where the property is. So if it's within 0 to 400 meters, you've got those specific controls there. If your property is further out, between 400 and 800 meters, you're given less floor space to play with, and the height is only 4 stories instead of 6. And here's some examples of shop-top housing. Similarly, between 0 to 400 and 400 to 800 meters, the further out you go, the less you can build, basically, which makes sense. So there's other things. So someone asked before, what about council's controls? I think we had 2 questions already. So the government has also introduced another policy kind of on the side called a tree canopy guideline, which tells you, and I think the next slides will give you an example of what that looks like. And ultimately, council's setback controls will apply also. So you've got your floor space height, but council's setback, you have to look at both documents, basically, the state government policy as well as the council controls. The tree canopy guide, it is, so if you were to build a house right now in Northern Beaches, you have to provide a certain amount of landscaped area. So this is really no different in terms of you need a certain amount of deep soil. I'm not going to go into what that means, deep soil, as well as a tree canopy, where you have to have enough garden space to plant big trees, not little, bushes, something more substantial. So you also have to consult these controls also. So I've got 2 case studies to share with you. Hopefully none of these are your properties, so I do apologise. So I randomly looked at a property in Manly. So it's an R1 zone. I've measured it. It's 525 square meters in area, 12 meters width. Again, I was just using Google Maps to measure it, but if it was 11.9 meters frontage, then you wouldn't be able to do this here. And when I Googled the address, it came up with this nice picture, and I looked up, it's not heritage listed, so that, well, it looks nice, but it's not listed, so that's a good thing. The these controls certainly apply to this property. I then, on that left aerial, I did a quick Google map with walking distance. I can't see what it is, but it's definitely, I think maybe 650 meters was the answer. And then that's the property on the right. So what could you achieve on this property? Let's find out. So you could build a dual occupancy. All of this is obviously subject to council approval. That I think is probably the real estate agent's best phrase ever, as well as it's up to me to get the approval, so no pressure. Then you could do a residential flat building also. Again, it has to tick all the boxes. In this case, if you were to do an RFB, a residential flat building, you could actually achieve 420 square meters of floor space. So that might equate to possibly 3 or 4 units. One of the things you can't do here is townhouses because the property is actually less than 600 square meters. It's 525 square meters. So the first thing you look at is the lot size. If that's crossed off, then you can't do townhouses there. You could do shop top housing, except I don't know how you'd be able to do that on such a small property, but certainly you could if you were game enough. So there's another example I've chosen in DY. Some of you might know this street, Victor Road. It's opposite the park. What's the park called?
Victor Park.
Victor Park, of course. Of course, I'm not a local. I live in St Ives, but I come around here maybe once a month to the beaches with my family. So I just looked at this property randomly. It's 2 properties. So let's say we put them together. We're a small-time developer, or I go in with my neighbour, let's say. So the property is about 1,125 square meters, and the site width is around 26 meters. I've done this little calculation also. I think it's about 700 meters walking distance to the shops. So townhouses are in. You could do townhouses there. Again, the controls look similar, obviously, like 2-story buildings. And I don't know how many townhouses you could achieve there. You'd have to, I guess, speak to an experienced local architect. Residential flat building, you could do that also, 900 square meters. So again, I don't know how many units you could achieve on that site, but I would say it might be a nice little development. And lastly, here are just some useful tools for you. There's the map, which we've spoken about a lot, even though we've said it's not to be relied upon, but I would say probably 95% of the properties are accurate. Google Maps, we all have that. There's the New South Wales Planning Portal Viewer, where you can find out the zoning of your property and other useful information. There's also Prop Code, which is what I was talking about before. It's a really handy app to use. I believe there's a free element in there. If you just type in your address, it'll tell you if you're in or out of this area, and it'll tell you a whole bunch of other things. And I've just developed a quick chat GPT that took me about 10 minutes to do. So feel free to check all of those useful tools out. I'm sure there's more, but I think this will keep you busy for a little while. And that's it. Thank you very much.
All right, let me try this one. Questions, guys?
Is there an app or somewhere where we can check whether you're in the bushfire zones? Because let's say Forestville and French's Forest is forest.
Yes.
Bush.
Yeah, good question. I was looking at that.
Is there?
when I
Because I've been looking and I can't find it.
Yeah, when I was preparing this presentation, I actually had the bushfire map. I was limited to time and slides, otherwise would be here all night. But that planning spatial viewer, which is the government's free mapping system, it'll tell you if you're in a bushfire prone area or not. So you could look at that.
Thank you.
Yes. Just mention who the question is.
For heritage listed property, is it local or state level heritage?
Local.
Local council.
Yep. Most properties are locally listed. There's only I wouldn't imagine there'd be too many around here that are state listed.
Ellie, I was just wondering, is there any pressure being applied by the state government on the local councils for expediting the DAs?
Expedite what, sorry?
Making things faster for the approvals.
It's the talk of the town at the moment. Councils are incredibly slow, but since the 1st of July, they've been given deadlines to approve things within 115 days. So they are actually under the microscope at the moment, to the point that we've had actually a few refusals in the last few weeks, basically because council said they've run out of time to assess our DAs. But yeah. But I would say too that this policy, I said it before, it's not really geared towards fast approvals. There's nothing in there that says you're going to skip the queue. Really, you're going to go in at the bottom of the queue with everybody else.
You used to be able to pay money, Ellie. Give like a brown paper bag or something. Don't say I said that.
You did mention it was only DAs, not CDCs.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, there is an ability to do CDCs also under the housing code, but a different part of the housing code. So you can do dual occupancies. It again depends on the circumstances.
With this LMR in mind, will they change the parameters of the CDC? I wonder.
No, they're totally separate policies.
Just following on from that. So if you can do a CDC at the moment for a duplex or dual lock in Manly and Pittwater, but you can't do it in Warringah, does that mean you can do a dual lock in Warringah, but you just can't do it under a CDC?
A good question. I would say so, yeah. This policy is just DAs. Like since 1st of July, like a lot of people don't know, actually dual occupancies were switched on everywhere. Even where I live in Ku-ring-gai Council, it was switched on, but you can't actually lodge a DA because there were no controls to lodge a DA for a dual occupancy.
I mean, that's assuming that the councils can cope with all these DA applications. And, I mean, they move at a very slow pace notoriously. So it's going to be interesting to see how it evolves.
I agree, yeah. Yeah, like sometimes you will have to go to the Land Environment Court, to speed up the process in certain scenarios. But certainly if you have to go in with a robust application, you can't have anything missing, otherwise they're going to find it and it'll slow the process.
What about properties on Condamine Street, which is not shaded in the LMR zone?
Then I would say they're out. They're out of this policy, but there could be something else you can do outside of this policy.
So just remember that the commercial areas are excluded. So, Pittwater Road, a lot of it. So if we bring up that heat map, I'll give you that early because that's probably on. If we bring up that heat map of my one, oh, no, that one, your one was better. Yeah, go forward. So just remember when you're on that back one, yeah. So see that the lovely lady that asked the question about Condamine Street, you'd find that Condamine Street in Manly Vale is that that sort of heart in the middle. So those guys are commercial precincts, so they don't apply to this uplift that we're talking about. Pittwater Road, DY is the same, parts of Oaks Avenue and, commercial the same. And that was something that we initially struggled with. We're going, hang on a sec, we're within 400 metres or you're almost two within when you're a commercial zoning. So they've left those planning principles alone. And the fun part of the night's coming where Ellie's going to talk about everything I said wrong when I spoke. But if he hasn't corrected me for now, I think I'm okay.
Ellie, we've got a lot of 3-story walk-ups in the area. Is there opportunities like the space above for a 4th story?
To an existing building? I think these controls are really geared towards new builds rather than add-ons or alterations and additions. But I would say you could certainly look at that for sure.
It's a great question. You've always got really good questions. social media as well. Thanks, Brendan.
Hi, Ollie. Just a quick question. The zonings are based on the existing council LEP. Is there any consideration been given to changing, say, some of the R2s that are within this area to R3s or R4s?
Yeah, so is there any change in zoning? Like Mark kind of said at the beginning, the technical zone hasn't changed, but you can now build a block of apartments in an R1 zone. If you think about like in the West, you've got a lot of R1 zones that it might be a terrace or a very small property. So you could build apartments there in theory. But the zonings themselves are not changing. This kind of doesn't override the zones, but it kind of uplifts what you can do on the property. Good question.
Real estate just allowed to ask questions.
Thanks so much for tonight.
Yeah.
Do you think there'll be any leniency with minimum lot sizes, minimum widths, minimum distance, proximity to?
No.
Radius?
No.
1 meter?
No, I said that already, Billy. Even if it's 449 square meters, it's a no. Even so, even with a DA, if you're 1 square meter short or 1 meter short, it's a no.
Wow.
You've got to be in, but you've got to always buy in a bit of property next door. Yeah.
Is there any implication for...
Hi there.
1 second. We've got one more question. You'll be next.
Thank you. Is there any implications for regular single dwelling blocks? Like if you bought a property that's in an area that previously was standalone housing, and now I guess theoretically all your neighbours could build apartments beside you or townhouses or whatever. Is there any other changes to like the kind of DA conditions that you could build, knowing now that you might have walls on either side of you?
I haven't seen that. Certainly, I would say this policy has probably considered those properties, the outlier properties, but it's kind of the same here. We're sitting in a town centre and there will be properties, maybe not next door, but a few blocks down or buildings down that might be a house. So you'll have that everywhere where, that there is this conflicting interest of property types, like things like shadowing and all of that, that would be very tricky for council to approve something like a 6-story building right next to a single-story building. But this policy indicates you can do it.
So, sorry, just to clarify, so you're saying this new change would override those historical principles?
Correct. Yeah.
Thanks.
There's one more question in the corner.
Yeah, hi there. I have a property in West Street in Brookvale. I've got a warehouse. It's a 2-story warehouse. I was just wondering if I can add an extra story on top. Is an office or residential? I'm in a commercial area already.
Yeah, this policy probably is geared towards residential developments, but we could have a chat later if you want about that.
Good, thank you.
Just 2 questions here. Albert from DY. Actually bought my property from Mark.
That's good.
Yeah, go DY. Now, my 2 questions are, can I do a dual occupancy if I have a detached studio already?
Ooh, good one. So like a granny flat?
No, just a detached studio.
What's in the studio? Just a empty room?
Yeah, just an empty room.
Again, yeah. Someone asked a question before, can I add on top of my existing building? It hasn't been tested. The policy's only been out for 3 weeks.
Okay.
But you could definitely explore it.
Second question is, underground car parking, is that counted as a story?
No. No, I didn't include car parking on my slides, but I think there's details on your pamphlets about parking there.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm also part of the Mark Novak fan club, bought in DY a few years ago, and very glad I did. Mark's best guy. If anyone's selling, go to him. Anyway, is there a way to tactically stretch the FSR to the maximum, not waste space of corridors and circulation areas? And to his point, I'm assuming basement car parks doesn't count towards the FSR?
Correct. Yep. Balconies, yeah, no. Balconies are excluded from floor space ratio also. But to kind of maximize your development, speak to a good local architect, and I can definitely suggest some if you need one.
I did a really good example with the balcony, and I don't know if you can still do this, but I enclosed it. So they said if it was 1.4 high as the wall and it had a roof, it was a balcony, not a room. But then after it was approved, I glassed in the balcony.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, there's stuff out there. There's, and I think that stuff is when you really sweat the concept and you really sweat the asset, you look for these opportunities, and you see stuff like this. It meant a lot to what we were doing because it was effectively used as a third bedroom and it was a little place. So there's little fun stuff that I see clients do out there. Yeah, with great planners.
Yeah. So just quickly, there's Shackle Avenue's a unit block, basically, street of units. And I see from up there that the properties that are backing onto there, if they're classified as an R2 and they've got units behind them, let's say, would they be allowed to merge 2 blocks together and build units on that?
Clever. Now you're talking. Yeah, so the way you measure it is from the front of the property. So the front boundary, not from the door of your house, it's from the front boundary to the edge of the town centre. So perhaps, they might, if you're, it's good to think outside the box.
Well, it falls in the actual 800 metres.
Yeah, so you could, in theory, consolidate the properties. So converting 2 into 1 property, stage 1.
But would you be able, if there are 2, would you be able to go?
And then, again, maybe we could test this. I don't know if you want to. And then you put in a DA for a block of apartments, and then you'll say the front boundary is less than 800 metres, and it includes the whole property. So there you go.
Wow, I like that.
Yep.
Righty.
Okay, any other questions, guys? Anyone? Yeah.
Thank you. Ellie, just a quick question. So if I've got a property that does meet the requirements for, say, a duplex, what would be the next steps I would take as an individual landholder or homeowner to move it towards that and then towards obviously getting a duplex? So what's the next step I would take? And then number 2 will be for Mark Novak. I kind of know the answer, but I'm going to let you answer it. With an increased number of dwellings coming into the Northern Beaches, what's that going to mean for property prices moving forwards?
That's a good question. To answer your question, well, it's an interesting proposition, really. I think. Sorry, I was listening. Do you mind repeating the question?
Yeah, ask again.
Ask again.
Sorry, Elliot.
No. If I've got a property that meets the requirements for a duplex, what's the next step I should take as a property owner to get the ball rolling?
Sorry. This is my 4th presentation in a week, so I do apologise. Gather the team. So start with your town planner. Doesn't have to be me, can be somebody else, but definitely town planner is probably your first phone call, then an architect, local architect ideally also that knows the area well. That's probably step 1. Make some phone calls. Mark, the next question's for you.
Next.
Do you remember it?
Yeah, that was did you say the net effective pricing, Steve, or where were we there? The future? Look, I think the whole aim was affordability. I think it will introduce affordability. I think there's some people that make a little bit of money out of it. It could disrupt some neighbourhoods, but that was the whole idea of why this was introduced, because it didn't work the last 5 or 10, 15 years, not disrupting neighbourhoods. So I think councils like, thank God we don't have to make these decisions. Thank God we're being forced to be the bad guys to put this stuff through and get it approved. So they don't lose their jobs, or they don't lose votes. So the state's taken it in their hands. So I think the net effect on pricing is people are going to make a little bit of money. I think builders are going to make a bit of money. We've got a really rich builder in the room that's here. He's smiling with from here to here. It's already rich. And no, just joking. I think there'll be a pressure on building. I think there'll be a pressure, and then with the net effect of properties coming on, I think it's going to bring some a really necessary affordable price range to our area, which was the end game. So I think they're going to achieve what they want to achieve. And I think a lot of our properties actually sit outside of this price range. I think you guys would be really surprised to understand what a small market this is to affect you and your home. What I mean by that is, I think you can feel really comfortable if you're in a $2 million property that your price is not going to be eroded. And I think you can feel really comfortable if you're under 1.2 that your pricing is going to be eroded. And I think you can feel really comfortable that our community is getting a good chunk of affordable properties in between that 1.2 to 1.8 for young families to move into next, or downsizers to move into. So I think it's the net effect is clever. And I think there's the communities, don't forget, a lot of us are locals working in business for business in the area. It's good for more bums on seats, better it stimulates business and commerce and stuff like that, and jobs. So, builders, I think it's for a community. I think you've got to do something like this in order to thrive, because we know, and it's proven, that when you stagnate and do nothing, the communities die, and people leave those communities, country communities. So it's critical for the lifeblood of our community, and net effect with price, I think it's going to be great. But not as easy as we think, but it's going to be great. Any other questions, guys? We made it right on time. I'm just looking forward to, we're going to have 4 people going for Ellie's thigh and below when they're crash tackling. We're going to have 4 people on the upper body, just to make sure when he falls, he doesn't fall over. But he's here. He's hopefully going to hang around a little bit. Thank you so much for your time. And don't forget, you've got the phone numbers there that is there with all that data. We're here all the time. We're not going anywhere, so feel free to call us tomorrow, next couple of days, talk to us tonight. Thank you so much. When we do go to this effort, the best reward is attendance. And thank you so much for coming and being here and listening, and hopefully you can go forth to friends and family, a little bit more. But, putting it on is a big thing, and we were just chuffed when we thought, that's what people wanted. When it booked out quickly, we're like, that's awesome. That's what people wanted. We did the right thing, go. So we really appreciate your attendance tonight. Thank you, everyone. And thank you to the crew who set up today and are here tonight as well to set everything up. So, guys, thank you. And we're here to chat with you tonight. Thanks. Thank you, Lisa.